If you have a red velvet cake lover in your life, this recipe is gonna make them smile. Let's get started with this cake batter, guys. Before we get started, guys, please remember, get everything to room temperature. All your ingredients, take them out of the fridge beforehand. Once they're room temperature, that will help to prevent curdling, and it will just help everything to blend even easier. If you're wondering how I get the eggs to room temperature, what I do is I just run them under some warm water, or I sit them in a bowl of warm water, not hot water, because that's gonna cook them a little bit. So make sure it's just warm water. So this recipe calls for butter, which adds a lot of nice flavor and moisture, but we're also adding oil to add extra moisture. Just make sure it's a neutral flavored oil. You don't want to use an oil that's going to take over the whole taste of the cake. If you can't find buttermilk at your grocery store, just get some heavy cream or some whipping cream and add about 2 tablespoons of vinegar to it and let it sit before using it. So there's steps to making this cake really nice and fluffy. The creaming of the butter and sugar, the whisking, all of that stuff. This step, sifting the dry ingredients, it helps to remove the lumps, but also incorporating air into the cake mixture. So you want to add the dry ingredients a little at a time, just to ensure that it's properly mixed, but also you want to prevent a cloud of flour in your face. So add it a little bit at a time. So the cake mixture is basically ready. All we need now is the color. I'm using some gel color here. I've done this different ways before. I've added add the coloring to the buttermilk, and I've also added it at the last minute like I'm doing now, and both ways work for me, so you can try either way. I was using my gel coloring at first, but then I was like, you know what, Jareen, this thing is pricey, so let's just use the liquid red coloring. So that's why I switched. I find that depending on the brand, you might use varying amounts, but usually at least 2 tablespoons to 3 tablespoons is what I use to get it nice and red. So I'm going to be using 2 layer cake tins. I prefer to do it this way instead of using a big cake tin and then cutting the cake in half. It's just less work for me. So I've lined it with parchment paper circles and just greased it with a little oil. And now I'm going to be using a measuring cup just to make sure that each cake tin has equal amounts of cake batter. That way, when the cakes are baked, they will be the same height and have a nice even look when you cut a slice. So we want our cakes to be nice and moist and fluffy. You don't want them to dry out. So as soon as that 30 minutes are up, take them out of the oven and put them on a cooling rack so that air can circulate all around them. If you put it on a regular flat surface, then the air won't get to circulate, so the pan is gonna remain hot and the cake is gonna keep cooking in the pan, and we don't want that because we don't want it to dry out. So we're doing the same thing for our cream cheese frosting. We want to make sure everything is at room temperature, and even if it's not at perfect room temperature, take it out the fridge so it's not as cold, because you don't want the frosting to be lumpy. We're going to be creaming the cream cheese first to get it nice and smooth before adding the butter. So I know the cakes are baked for 30 minutes, but one trick I do use to find out if a cake is done is I prick it with a wooden skewer or toothpick, and once it comes out clean, then that means it's done. So you can do that if you're ever unsure when you're baking something. Alright, it's time to frost that cake. I have a wide plate here on top of a turntable, and I'm just going to put a little frosting in the center. So the reason I'm doing this is just to prevent the cake from slipping around once I start putting the frosting on. If you don't have a turntable, it's fine. Just get a really big plate and use that, and you can spin it while you're decorating the cake. So what you'll do is you're going to be putting about 1/3 of the frosting on top of this layer. It looks excessive, but believe me, it's not. You want to have enough icing so you can spread a nice even layer right across. So if you look at the motion, I just have the spatula and I'm swiveling it right on top of the frosting, but I'm not lifting the spatula off the frosting. Because what happens sometimes is if you just lift it off, you end up picking up some of the cake and then you have crumbs all over. So try to keep it on top and just move it around while spinning the cake. It's kind of like you're making a cream cheese sandwich, guys. You want it to look like this. You want the frosting to be oozing out on the sides, not like this side, but like this side. That way, when you're ready to decorate the sides, it's easy because frosting is already there. So we are gonna cover the cake completely now. You wanna use all your frosting, put it in the center of the top layer of the cake. And again, it's gonna look like a lot, but it's better when you have a lot of frosting, because what's gonna happen is you're going to spread it out and allow it to fall over the sides, so that when you're smoothing out the sides, a lot of frosting is already there. So once all the frosting has fallen over on the sides, just spread it out, hold the spatula vertically, and smooth out all of that frosting on the sides of the cake. One thing that can help to smooth out the frosting even nicer is if you just dip the spatula in a glass of water and use that same spatula and smooth out the icing or the frosting. It does help. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. If you are going for a clean cut design or a clean cut cake, then you can just keep smoothing out your cake, guys, until it's as smooth as you desire. But if you're going for a simple decoration, you can stop at this point, and we're gonna be doing something very easy. So here's what I'm doing. I'm literally just using the same spatula just to tap gently on the icing all over the cake, and you're just gonna get a nice little cute design. It's pretty simple. Usually if I'm making a cake for home, I do this one because it's really easy. So you can try this out and see how you like it. All right, it's the moment of truth. We're gonna cut into this delicious red velvet cake. It is so soft. When I tell you how soft it is, guys, I'm not exaggerating. It's really, really tender and moist. Look at that. Ooh. I promise you, I wouldn't steer you wrong. This is an amazing red velvet cake. The frosting is not too sweet, and then the cake is just fluffy and moist and tender. You could eat it with a spoon. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and as usual, let me know in the comment section how you like the recipe once you try it. See you next time.